and good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so you have now heard about our Vision 2025, kind of the direction that we'll be moving toward. And you've also heard about our core values and the strategies and action that we'll be holding true to get there. And just now, Rita gave us an overview of our district budget. So the resources, the precious resources we have to achieve and enact those strategies. Well, the picture of our financials is not the most positive at the moment. I'll get into a little more detail on the trade-offs and what that means for us as a district. But let me talk a little more about how all of these bubbles here connect. As Rita described, our local control funding formula, the LCFF, makes up the majority of our budget, and that comes from the state. Housed within that are supplemental and concentration grants that are generated by the number of low-income students, English learners, and foster youth students that we have. Now, the state prioritizes those populations of students. We also prioritize as our focal students, in addition to those populations, our African American students, as well as our students with special needs, our focal students in total. Alongside the LCFF is our LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan. That plan encompasses not only our dollars, but it also houses our actions and our data. So what metrics do we look at to inform the actions that we take? Those two bodies kind of live across the overall district. And within your school sites, we've mirrored the allocation of funding and dollars in the form of weighted student formula and the multi-tiered system of supports. And we've also mirrored the LCAP in the form of the balanced scorecard, the BSC. So that's your school site plan. Dollars, actions, and data live within the BSC and are intended to also prioritize and reflect the needs of our focal students and our students as a whole. I'm going to go into a little more detail regarding the weighted student formula and MTSS just now, but collectively, all of these bubbles and all of the conversations you'll be having today and in the weeks to come will help inform the plans that live at your school sites and will aggregate up to inform our district plan, the LCAP, which you'll see on April 19th, I'll foreshadow that a little bit, will be discussed in a public forum. So let's go into a little more detail about the school budget factors that make up the weighted student formula and MTSS. All right, you'll see that there has been an increase in your WSF allocations, and this is primarily to accommodate increases in raises and benefits that Rita had alluded to in her presentation. So these are kind of mandatory and naturally occurring costs that are in place already. Enrollment is another primary driver of the budget, and so the number of students within your schools drives the base allocations. It's kind of dictated based on the students you serve within your sites, or that we have at our site. Again, particular student demographics help increase that allocation even further because we are prioritizing our focal students. And those characteristics include our low-income students, English learners, and foster youth. We've also prioritized, as I mentioned earlier, a broader span of focal students. And lastly, MTSS, our multi-tiered system of supports. Those are centrally deployed resources that we allocate based on a whole set of data. And Guadalupe had spoken to some of those, actually a number of those, and they include our input data for our sites, so those are the demographics of students that we serve, as well as our output data, so not only test scores, but also social emotional indicators, such as attendance and chronic absenteeism, and also student surveys and family surveys. We take those into account as well. So given all of that, the picture that Rita painted makes it very clear that we are in a situation where our revenues are slowing and expenditures expenditures continue to grow. And we have priorities we want to hold as top of mind in the coming years, which means we're going to have to make some difficult decisions and trade-offs. I'm going to share some of the examples of conversations that are happening at central office across our district departments, and then we'll go into some of the conversations that are happening at our school sites as well regarding trade-offs. So some of the things we've been looking at as we review strategies and actions we're holding in central office are, one, how do we redeploy some of our central office staff to kind of cover vacant positions within our school sites, whether those are teaching positions or administrative positions. We're also looking at, I'm glad that's appreciated. It's not the easiest conversation to have, but it's certainly an important one. We're also looking at scaling back existing programs, particularly those that haven't yielded the level of impact that we intended. And this is to allow for kind of shifting of resources to areas that can achieve higher impact in our priority areas. The third piece here is around reviewing our school portfolio. And what that means is we're looking at enrollment trends to inform placement of programs to better reflect the needs of our student populations, our students. And of course, we are looking at how to be more effective with existing resources. So let's be more efficient in how we deploy what we have already. And this may also mean we're going to need to hold off on implementing new programs. The goal is that we are funneling our resources toward our priority areas and areas or programs that may not directly align with those priorities we've named, particularly accelerating achievement for our most vulnerable students and ensuring that we can invest in our staff. Those may need to be held off in more positive financial times. On a brighter note, we are looking to seek additional voter-approved funding. Cheers to that. San Francisco voters have been very supportive of public education throughout the last several years, including the extension of our Public Education Enrichment Fund to support our arts, athletics, and libraries. And you've also, many of you, have been very supportive of parcel tax measures as well that support our teachers and technology efforts. I did not expect to get this much applause on this particular slide, but thank you. And lastly, the recent bond measure was approved, and that means so much for the improvement of our school facilities. All right, so given kind of the priorities that we hold top of mind and the trade-off conversations that we're having, we do recognize that school sites are also having similar conversations. And I'm going to bring up Sunnyside Elementary to share some of their conversations that have been had. Principal Renee Marcy and SSC